So, hello and welcome back, everybody, to this special Western astrological preview of the upcoming full moon in Scorpio. My name is, of course, Davyd from the Davyd and Bella QPW channel, and today I'm joined by a local sister of ours. Welcome, Shannon Gill from the Astrological Society of Austin. Hi, Shannon, how are you?
Hi, Davyd. I'm so good and very happy to be here. Thank you for having me on the show.
Bless you. So, we know our sister from local activities in this area. And in fact, Shannon joined our workshop here in Texas back, wow, it was about a year and a half ago now, I think. It's a while ago, right?
I think it was in the eclipse portal 2023 in the
Was.
fall. We
It
found
was.
each other in a yurt out in the woods and
Right.
felt very
So,
synchronous.
yeah, that particular day was looking at working with the oak and plant medicines, which if actually interestingly, the oak is part of the energetic wave spell that we're in with the Mayan time codes right now, which is actually the container that we're holding this talk in. And Shannon is actually part of the group that is journeying with us over these. Well, it was 13 days from when the wave spell started and on May the 3rd, but it will run until May the 15th. And this Scorpio full moon holds a pivotal place in this 13-day sequence where we're working with the consciousness of the sun. So I want to introduce our sister a little bit more formally. She is the co-founder of the Shift Foundation with her partner Russell, and as I said, is the steward of the Astrological Society of Austin. But let's just take a few moments now, Shannon, for you to introduce yourself to our audience and perhaps how you got into astrology, and yeah, what you do with your astrological work.
Yeah, thanks. Excuse me, I was just changing my screen. Let's see, I synthesize a lot of different systems. I have a background in Buddhist psychology, and then I went on and discovered astrology, and I blend evolutionary astrology with archetypal astrology. I'm really focused on the evolution of the soul, both the personal and the collective. And I'm also very immersed in the expressive arts and healing. And so that was my track in college was dance, music, and art therapy.
Oh, nice. Wow.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we love in our tribe, especially, is to bring different modalities together. And generally, we work with a few basic principles. We work with astrology, both mostly Western as a point of impact into the 3D, but also a little bit more increasingly sidereal astrology, as we feel that perhaps this is more the energetic initiation point of astrology in general. But we're still investigating that as a group. But we also work primarily with the cosmology of the fixed stars of the stellar nations pathway, which gives us more of a kind of a blueprint behind the blueprint of our natal birth chart. But we also
Mhm.
work with the Mayan time codes. And when we bring all of these different coordinates in together, we call this our internal quantum compasses. But we do very much still look at Western astrology, even if I feel a little bit, sister, that maybe it's starting to feel a little more fluid, particularly with Neptune moving into Aries. I feel that the planets, the archetypes themselves, are going through their own full rebirth process. So it's given me a rise to this question, which is still an open-ended one, but I'd love to put to you, do you feel that the nature of the archetypes perhaps is going to change moving forward? And in doing so, are we perhaps looking at a big reset in Western astrology in general? Or maybe it's going to change completely?
I've had a lot of those contemplations myself, actually. I feel like astrology has to evolve in a lot of the ways, and a lot of the systems are really based in a deterministic model. And I feel that we are moving into a space where we're recognizing that we are not confined to any kind of a system, and that I think the ancients really taught us that at some point we're to transcend the chart
Right.
and that really it's just a doorway to unlock the path of awakening. And so I would have to agree with you that I think that everything is changing really dramatically and really quickly.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I love that perspective. And, I've often said to people, like, because I've studied like things like the off-planet ancestors, the Pleiadians, the Syrians, and Nibiruans, and particularly in the world of the Anunnaki, I love the snake earrings you've got. They are our snake ancestors, the beings that gave us the gifts of healing and the gifts of sacred geometry and geomancy and sacred numbers, but also gave us a whole bunch of lower fallen stuff to deal with too, which I think that we're actually coming to the end of. And it's interesting that we're in, and the earrings are perfect because we're in the lunar month of liberation, which is the snake totem in the
Mhm.
Mayan lunar calendar, which is 364 days as opposed to the Zolkin, which is the 260-day count, which we're working with in this wave spell. But I kind of think that many people said, in the old days of the Anunnaki, Enki good guy, bad guy, and Lil good guy, bad guy. And I'm like, but how can we say that about anybody? How can we say that about ourselves? Have I been a good guy permanently my whole life? I'd like to think so, but probably the truth is something different. Have I been a bad guy? No. Have I been perfect? No. Am I a human? Yes. So we have that spectrum. And I
Yeah.
think if people, even if I bring this back to myself, if people still are judging me for the person I was when I was 20 years old now, nearly something years later, then perhaps they haven't understood that we evolve as beings. And I really wanted to put this into the ethers in my own meditations, thinking about fallen angels and fallen off-planet ancestors, including the Anunnaki, and saying, hey, these guys also have gone through a whole series of processes, including a fall from a great height and then a recapitulation, a surrender, and a return to all that is, the same one that we're going through. So, with that in mind, particularly with Neptune moving into Aries and being a Pisces rising, I love the energy of Neptune very much. It feels very familiar to me. But Neptune now feels like a guy released in Aries. It's like, oh my God, my sojourn in the watery depths where I was the lord of the water world and everything else. Now I'm in Aries and I get to experience the higher octave of my own spirituality through the sense of I am, but with that big background in the collective consciousness of Pisces. So, what do you think, Shannon? Do you ever take on all of that or a perception on it before we get into the charts?
I absolutely do. I think that we're shifting out of that Pisces age of duality where we're, really asleep to the truth of cohesion, and that in that part of the awakening is really where we're starting to understand how we transcend duality, and that means that we integrate the shadow and we integrate the darkness, and from that one mind perspective, we're all just a piece of the organism. So maybe in this life you're playing the nefarious role, in the next life it's me. So it's kind of like, so long as we have that whole perpetrator villain archetypal system going on, I think we're just still asleep in the Pisces age. So
Right,
yeah, and I think that also the fact that we're in this year feels like such a transition year, and it's the year of the snake as well, and it's a 9 year.
right.
uh, this full moon feels really significant in the sense of this opportunity. It feels extremely potent and dynamic of what we have the capacity to really surrender and move into a new octave.
Right. So if we were just joking before we hit record, because I know that you have a lot of planets in the eighth house, and I, of course, have a big stellium in Scorpio. So this is familiar territory for us, the
Yeah.
sort of Scorpio energies of death and rebirth, catalyzation, transmutation, the phoenix rising from the ashes. And I was just saying to Shannon, if you had to choose a whole day in the year that you would think that perhaps we need full illumination, it would be on a Scorpio full moon. Anything that needs to be brought to the surface from the realms of the hidden depths of the underworld, a Scorpio full moon is when you would expect to see it, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. And this is the time of the great revealing, so it's all coming up. It's all coming up for review, and I would have to agree with that. And especially as I mentioned, because we have Uranus as part of the equation here in the dance.
Right, so we're going to pull up some charts in a second, and we're also going to take a quick look at something that is happening today when we're recording, but later on this evening here in Central Time, which is Mercury conjuncting Chiron, because I think this is a part of the story, but I'd love to get Shannon's take on all of this. So I'm just going to bring up a couple of slides just to help the two of us focus through this. So let me just do that a second. Let's bring that up there. Okay. So, yes, we are holding this particular talk within the container of a 13-day journey that we are holding globally with our QPW tribe called the Solar Gateway. This is something we do a lot of in our tribe. We work with 13-day wave spells, which in themselves represent the 13 steps of creation or the 13 steps of the ascension ladder. Each day of a wave spell represents a tone or a dimension. So as we go through a 13-day wave spell, we're actually climbing the dimensional realms of our own consciousness, but through the energetic imprints of the tones themselves. And so we have every 13 days this cycle where we can do lots of great healing work, we can do lots of manifestation work, but always through the filter of the particular glyph that sets the tone for that wave spell. In this case, it's the yellow magnetic sun. So this gives us this beautiful counterpoise where we're working with this full moon energy of Scorpio, but it's manifesting or it's taking place on the day 10 of this solar gateway wave spell, which is the day of manifestation. So it's a day of manifestation of solar energy on a full moon in Scorpio, but with the glyph of the red planetary moon. So this kind of sets the tone for this lunar, solar, yin yang, masculine, feminine rebalancing of the energies. And of course, Black Moon Lilith has been very in the mix. So that's a little bit about the container that we're setting this particular astrological preview into. And of course, here are the dates of the sun, the 3rd to the 15th. So we're currently now here in the western part of the world in day 4, which is always about setting the structure or the container in which we start to radiate the energy of what we're envisioning or manifesting during this wave spell. But with all of that in mind, we head now into the main event, which I think has the potentiality to be a bit of a rock and roll moment in our world. Not necessarily because I'm Scorpio and I know the energies well, but I think that this is a moment where we need the energy of Scorpio to bring down the veil, to show people the illusions they're living under, the delusion, the things that they've been hiding, the shadow that they've not looked at. Because, I see this kind of spiritual bypassing a lot, Shannon, unfortunately, in the spiritual world, which everyone wants to be in the light and the love of multidimensional consciousness. But A, they have no idea what that really is. And B, they're not prepared to do the inner work, which is actually the gateway to get there. So I'm thinking that maybe this Scorpio full moon, working with the energy of sun, solar, lunar, yin yang in balance might be the gateway portal. But I want you to give us your overview of this full moon Scorpio and all of the other transits and aspects that are happening too. So please take it away.
All right, great. Yeah, I would have to say I agree. So just in basic terms, of course, a full moon is whenever we have the opposition between the sun and the moon. And in this case, we have the full moon at 22 degrees Scorpio, which means that the sun is at 22 degrees of Taurus. And when we have a full moon cycle, we are closing something up that started with the new moon in that sign. And so the new moon in Scorpio would have been last November, is I think the first week of November. And so this is, your sand mandala analogy was actually perfect for this axis. The axis of Taurus Scorpio is just simply that. It's Taurus is and this is a fixed axis, is all the things that we love. It's all the things that we want to preserve. It's the desire. It's what we want. It has to do with our relationship to ourself in physical form. So our body, our temple. And it is, Scorpio, the polarity point is that process of regeneration. It's that process of death and letting go of the things that we love. I often look at some of the mythology, and I like to refer to the myth of Inanna and her journey, Inanna being the goddess of Taurus, the queen of heaven, is she's often referred to in her relationship to her sister, Ereshkigal, Scorpio, the goddess of the underworld, and that she's summoned into the underworld, and she goes down through the 7 gates. And at each gate, she strips off a layer of clothing until she lays naked in the underworld, and she's killed, through the sister of the Scorpio, the sting or the snake. And that symbolism is the death of the ego, the death of attachment, where we strip off. We know the spiritual awakening process has to do with the releasing of all of the illusions, whether it's or the attachments to our egotistical structure. So our false beliefs, our addictions, our materialism, all of the things that are part of that illusion of separation that we're waking up out of. And so the combination of the axis is sort of like how do we have the things that we want and the things that we desire and the things we want to preserve while not becoming too overly attached to them, and Taurus being also the earth herself and all of the beauty and all of the splendor. They say that the Buddha was a Taurus, and so of course Buddhism is all about non-attachment. And so this full moon here, that's whenever the light of the sun is going to illuminate the fullness of the Scorpio moon, which is the underworld. It's the shadow realm. It's all the things that have been previously hidden. And like Davyd said, that it's there is a lot of spiritual materialism. There's a lot of bypassing that happens on the planet. And nothing gets through at this point, this time of the great revealing. And the way through is through transmutation, is through shining the light into the parts that we want to hide, the places that we want to avoid. And the sun being the solar consciousness, the masculine essence of our being, the moon being our feminine, the waters, the underbelly of our existence. And so, Scorpio full moons maybe are considered the most intense of all of them because this is the pain body. This is where all the things have been stored. This is not just our own pain, but our collective pain. And so there's this opportunity to shine the light into those places. And sometimes, it happens without our consent necessarily. Sometimes it happens abruptly. Sometimes, the shock of being revealed comes through. And that's why there's often a lot of volatility around full moons in general, but definitely with Scorpio being there. The One of the aspects that is kind of a wild card in this equation is that we have the planet Uranus conjunct the sun. So that means that they're right next to each other and also opposing the moon. And Uranus is the wild card. Uranus is the planet that rules Aquarius. So it is about evolution in the future. And it's also highly electric, volatile, unpredictable. I call it the lightning bolt of change in the hands of destiny.
Yeah.
And so there's this opportunity for some shocking, unexpected, chaotic events to happen that sort of like break loose a lot of maybe old trauma or a lot of things that have been hidden, another Scorpio dynamic. And this could be obviously in our personal lives, but also in the world, some more disclosure, some more of the corruption, some more of the oozing coming through, the light
Mhm.
shining through, and the lightning bolt, the storm of awakening, uh, being that we can't hide these things anymore and things can't be obscured anymore. And this is where everything is coming up. It's the dross is rising so that we know what we're working with to transmute. And so there's this element of friction and storminess that's also part of this, which also can bring a level of freedom. It can bring freedom from something that's been lodged, something that's been repressed. Sometimes we're not intentionally, avoiding. Sometimes our psyche is protecting us, and maybe it's time for another layer to be released. The symbol of Scorpio is the snake, and the snake has an intelligence about it that whenever the skin dies and gets dried up, it will go rub up against something like a tree or a rock in order to initiate that ecdysis, that actual shedding process. And so was interesting whenever I studied this a little bit deeper, because it's sort of like our higher self creates the chaos. Our higher self creates something to get us out of our comfortability to where we're asleep or we've become apathetic to our evolution. And that initiates the evolutionary change or the forward growth through that underworld experience. So I think that we can trust sometimes whenever things seem like they're really out of control, because it's shaking things up where we've become stuck in a lot of ways. And Taurus the shadow of Taurus is stuck, wants things to be nice and
Right.
peaceful and harmonious all the time.
Right, and Taurians have a bit of a reputation for being stubborn, from what I understand sometimes, not wanting to shift, very much like the bull, right? But there are a couple of other things here. I love the fact that you brought in the upcoming Uranus Cazimi, because that happens, just 5 days later, I think, on May the 17th. And we've been tracking the energy of Cazimis for quite a long time. We perceive them through looking at the fixed stars to be very, very potent points of combustion, of rebirthing, and we can see the effect that these Cazimis have on all kinds of different aspects of our society. So we have this energy of the Uranus Cazimi incoming as this full moon hits. And I think in many ways, it feels to me like the full moon is setting up something for the Uranus Cazimi. Now, we live in a time of turbulence and change, and every day is its own adventure, as we say. And we don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. We had an unexpected 24-hour tornado warning here over the last few days. And prior to that, the skies were blue and clear and it was warm and hot, and there was no indication of anything happening. So I think that the best thing that we can say in these moments is just to stay grounded and centered and be prepared for anything to happen, but also not to be scared. There is so much fear in the collective about whatever it is that's going to happen. And we can tell that people who don't have so much spiritual connection, they can feel it in their body medicine that something is incoming. But, I just wanted to pick up also that this moon is conjuncting Juno, Shannon. So do you think that there's something here about revisiting commitment, relationships, or how would you see that?
Yeah, I definitely do. Scorpio Taurus is one of the relationship axis. And, if we look at the rulers of the lunation, the ruler of Taurus, of course, is Venus. And
Right.
she's just barely started a new cycle here. And there's been, I think, a lot of relationship transformations, shakeups and breakups and renewals through the Venus retrograde. And also, again, since we had in the eclipse, the last Aries eclipse of the last 2 years where we were trying to rebalance our partnerships. And with Juno, I think it's definitely emphasizing that there's this capacity to go deeper. Scorpio, is about merging. Where Taurus is our relationship to ourselves, Scorpio is really about that soul merging alchemical process that where we can transcend duality together. And so I think that the work that is being called upon us has this opportunity to take us deeper into our partnerships.
Right, and I think maybe that's also part of the general maturation of humans across the board. I kind of think that generally as a species or as a society, we've been a bit sort of like petulant teenagers, blaming everybody else. Mum and dad did it to me. They didn't look after me. They didn't support me, all of which may be true on some level. And even further up the food chain, it was our Nibiruan ancestors who turned off our DNA, those rascals. Like, what did they do to us? It's like, well, maybe if you expand the view back, you understand that they were actually asked to do that by all that is, by God the Creator, as part of the experimentation to bring us into 3D physicality. So does that make them the good guys or the bad guys? Well, this is where the non-dual piece comes in because duality is a paradox. But I think that as we explore all of these ideas, we're being forced to confront our relationship to self and other. How do I maintain my individuality within the collective sea of consciousness? How do I communicate energetically, maybe telepathically? All of these things are starting to come online. And I think in doing so, and you're right about the whole Venus star point and her review process, is that there was a lot of pressure put on partnerships and relationships during that period to see what they were based on. What was their foundation? Is it based on illusion? Is it based on codependency? Or is it based on an actual heart connection that is part of a much bigger tableau? And I think that perhaps we're coming to this point that all relationships and partnerships are up for review. Is it time to move on? Is it time to cement? Is it time to come back to basics? Again, we could say Taurus is asking us to build from the ground up. Do we torch everything, a bit like maybe the financial system is going through at the moment, and then start again with something completely new? Do we perhaps, like some people believe, try to transform something from the inside, like the political system? I remember as a young political student, I naively believed that we could transform the system from within. Some 30 years later, I now realize that the best thing to do is just remove it completely and start with a whole new system. But that I think is part of what is coming up for review
Mhm.
on this full moon channel, because of course Scorpio also relates to the use of power or the misuse of power. And
Mhm.
we've had a lot of that in our world, And I guess if we're also super honest, we can also look back in our own lives, as I've been forced to do in many meditations, and see where I misuse my power, where I misuse my innate ability to use magic, and had to recapitulate, very Carlos Castaneda style, really, if anyone's ever read those books. But that process of going back and seeing those places where you maybe did misuse your Scorpio energy, or however it comes to you, and just saying, I'm really sorry, I did that out of ignorance. And I went through a process and apologized to everybody many moons ago that maybe I hurt through the misuse of words or ideas or even more manipulative Scorpio energies as a kid. I had to get what I wanted. But at the same time, we also then can fall into a lower note place of berating ourselves for how we've been and not being able to forgive ourselves. And that
Mhm.
keeps us also stuck in that place. And I think that with this full moon lunation, with the energy of Uranus, and here's something else that people often don't talk about, but Uranus was emasculated. He was castrated by his sun.
Mhm.
Right? And so if I think about that in context of the solar energy that we're working with, a very yang external masculine energy, perhaps this is where we're looking at the energy of Uranus needing to be restored. I kind of called it giving the bulls back to the bull. You know? So what do you think about that? Because it's something that kind of struck me as I was looking into this whole sacred masculine aspect to do with the sun. It's like people don't tend to mention this part of the Uranus mythology.
Yeah, I haven't actually thought about it like that either. It makes It makes a lot of sense. And when I think about Uranus, I just see the archetypal signature of Aquarius. And what you were speaking about with the misuse of power, I think it's important to also bring into the conversation about that Pluto, the ruler of the moon, Scorpio, just went retrograde and yesterday. And so there's definitely a collective call to go back in and to see, where we maybe overlooked, or where can we go back in and really take responsibility. Still some shadowy pieces hiding. And with that now exact squared on the full moon with Mercury, I
Right,
think that
literally exact, isn't it? Almost to the
it's
minute.
exact. Yeah. Yeah. So it goes from the Chiron today into this exact square. So it feels like the conversation is starting. And then we're going to have to get really real with ourselves. This is what this feels like. And, it's kind of, as an astrologer, it's hearing ourselves saying these things over and over, year after year. It's going to be an intense year. Oh, we're going to have to do the shadow. But it does feel like that we have been slowly, like, really getting towards this apex moment, like this year being the snake year, and all the planets moving from the existential into the Aries. It feels like we're really arriving. But we both know that the shadow is insidious, and it can be deceptive.
Right.
And so I do think that some integrity, places that we've deceived ourselves with that, also with that Saturn on the North Node, really wanting to help us to find true spiritual alignment into places that we've maybe been disillusioned or just out of integrity. Another thing I want to say about the relationships is that we've got the Mars Venus trining during the full moon. So it feels like there has been a completion process. There's something closing up, and that they're moving forward together now and in more of a harmonious way, which feels really good. And also just our creative endeavors, also possibly, hopefully, our financial endeavors, as Venus will be in shadow still territory, I think, till like the 14th, but that they're starting a new cycle together. And so that feels promising as well.
Right, so that's also a lot of the energy in the ethers right now is about the QFS, quantum financial system, or quantum wealth abundance system, as we're calling it, because QFS seems to trigger some people. We even talked about it in one of the talks that we put out yesterday for the immersion, talking about the energy of gold and silver. And if you think about it logically, how on earth can you put a monetary value, an illusory paper value, against something that is alchemically powerful like gold or silver and what they represent? I mean, so we have to kind of crack and break through this windscreen, this glass ceiling of all of these illusions, all of which most of us know, even the people who perhaps are not spiritual, but it's an inconvenient truth that we all have to look at, which is like most of this stuff that I base my structure on doesn't actually exist. If the numbers on the screen suddenly disappear or the screen disappears completely, who are you without your zeros on the screen? Who are you without any of that illusory kind of wealth? And I think that a lot of the conversation here, Shannon, is about how do we move to a quantum wealth abundance system that takes scarcity completely off the table. And I think that that's part of the conversation that is coming out of this period that we're in right now.
I agree. I think 100% that's the direction that we're moving, that we have to move. And, I think I see a lot of good strides in that area. And I know we have a ways to go, but yeah, I'm definitely tapped in to that as well.
I think everybody's tapped in right now. I know that many people out there are struggling financially, running on fumes, and of course, the rising cost and everything else is unsustainable. We all know that. And I think a lot of this is just about holding our nerve. It's kind of like a game of brinkmanship, almost, I think, between
Yeah.
the opposing forces of light and dark. And we have the satisfaction of knowing that the light is with us, and so that we pretty much have victory assured for once, it seems, compared to maybe some of the adventures of the last couple of millennia. But at the same time, it's one thing to know the energetic outcome, and it's another thing to show up in each and every moment to give it the dynamic, kinetic energy in 3D to make that possible. Otherwise it remains some sort of dream or vision that we hold whilst we're sat back on the sofa watching Netflix. I always think that it's important. The theater, we call it the theater, the dynamic theater that we play out, the so-called bad guys, the elites, the structure that's been running this, they've always played the theatre right in front of us and even told us what they're doing. That's how we've been able to decode so much of it over the last 10 years. But the same is true for us. If we want something to manifest, we kind of have to go through this theatre performance to call it in, to anchor it into 3D. And I think that that's where we have this really valuable energy of the sun in Taurus right now, with Uranus potentially offering us this moment of inspiration, of a lightning strike, of something unexpected, positively, and we can also say maybe negatively, depending on your perception, positively changing our outlook on the reality in which we're living in general. And I think that this full moon in Scorpio could provide some big shocks to many people about the actual structure of our reality, the sort of so-called Truman Show moment where it's like, oh my God, I'm living in a TV show. It's a very big one that involves lots of us, but I still feel like sometimes I look up in the sky almost expecting to see the gantry with the lighting and the props and everything else. So I don't know. What do you think about that, Shannon?
I just watched that movie like a couple of weeks ago for the second time, but I hadn't seen it in like, I don't know, 10 years or something. I
Right.
watched it with my son to kind of like start these conversations with him. He's 13. Uh, yeah, I mean, not for maybe us and a lot of your viewers. I think that we kind of realize we're living in a simulation. And I
Right.
agree with you. I kind of feel like I have the sense that this full moon, whatever the revelations are, because the Kazemi is just a few days later, that there's a real opportunity for some liberation from some things that have felt like, am I ever going to be done with this? Can I ever just lay this down? Do I have to keep recycling through these same old things, right? And maybe that also has to do with the work that you're doing with the gateway, the light codes coming in, just like burning off, you know.
Yes.
And I'm working with a lot of frequency medicine right now. I'm really helping people to give them some other tools. But one thing, last thing I want to share about the geometry of the chart is
Yeah.
it has a beautiful a mystic rectangle with the nodes. So it's two oppositions, right? So the nodal axis, which is the nodes of fate, which is
Uh-huh.
shooting us towards our destiny, with Saturn, where we're literally restructuring our dream. And then of course the full moon with Uranus and so when with a mystic rectangle, we've got the two oppositions and we have trines and sextiles. So there's just this can be this harmonization between the tension uh and the flowing energy with an opportunity. So it feels like there's a real opportunity to break through
Yeah.
and personally and collectively. So that feels pretty good to me.
Right, I definitely echo that sentiment. It feels like very much that we're on the, excuse me, we're on the edge of that sort of almost the precipice moment where we have to jump into the abyss and trust that spirit is going to catch us. And until you've done that process more than once, it can feel very ominous and even a little bit like, with apprehension and worry. But once you do it and you realize that you were always going to be caught by God, by Great Spirit, then it becomes a slightly easier process to do it again. But I love what you just shared there. I do think that this is a kind of a breakthrough moment, but we have to show up for ourselves. We have to be able to say, okay, I'm willing to have a look at that thing I didn't want to look at. Oh, actually, it's not so bad. It's not as bad as I thought. Whoosh, there we go, gone. And often when we look, we turn and face the monster, whatever the monster is. We're like, hey, you're not really such a monster after all, because more often than not, it's actually a part of us that we've rejected. And so I think in the end, with all of my internal meditations, I came to realize that pretty much everything that had bothered me was an aspect of me that I had rejected and put outside of myself that was trying to get my attention by bothering me through various psychic attacks and all kinds of other stuff. And to my horror, I was like, oh my God, it's me doing it to me. So
Right.
perhaps this is the revealing of that totality of ourselves with all of the light beams and the light codes coming onto the planet, because like you just said, very much agree that the sun is here to assist us, to allow us to remember who we are in our totality. But we can only do that and we can only receive the light codes if we've looked at the density of the shadow.
Exactly. And I see over and over that it's the shadow actually has the keys. There's something that's very potent there, in that dissolution, in that place of darkness and emptiness is the seed to the greater gifts. And so we're only rejecting parts of ourselves that are connected to our higher timelines whenever we're resisting, going into those places. So
Right, I love that. And thank you for bringing that up because, we've often said that really we have this latent fuel reserve. If we think of our shadow and density in a positive way, every time we go into that density and release it, there is a release of energy that allows us normally to receive some kind of realization or download. And I know from my own experiences, once I realized that actually there was always something really beautiful that happened after some difficult shadow work, I kind of got addicted to doing my shadow work and wanted more of it because the
Says
downloads afterwards were so great. So, I
yeah,
think,
and also I like to remind my clients that we don't have to take it all personally. This is
right?
collective. We're healing the maternal and the paternal line for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And so, it's just more like become the alchemist, just see it as this like science project and get through it and transmute and we can get on with our program of bringing this heaven to earth template.
Right, and so maybe just as a final thought before we wrap up this rapid fire we've got for an hour here already, almost. You mentioned something there that has come to me from a few tribe members recently, which is about yods, and I have two yods in my chart, and I found them very, very difficult. And almost what you were referring to is like a collective yod, which is like I've been around in this triangle, I don't know how many times now, and I can't find a way out. And what's going to break the circuit this time? And it feels a bit like somehow we're in a collective yod of like I've been here before, I know this pattern. I'm going to walk the same steps again, hoping that something is going to be different. But what is it this time that's going to allow that circuit to be broken once and for all? Is it the sun combined with the energy of Scorpio? Or do you have a final thought on that, Shannon?
I mean, I don't know astrologically maybe what it would be, but I just have a sense that it has to do with self-love and compassion for it's not like, oh shit, I'm still in this place or this thing, and beating ourselves up around whatever this shadow piece is or wherever we're feeling that we're, holding ourselves back. But maybe just a softening around all of it to let it in a communication with that piece. It's there for a reason. It's
Right.
there to show something. And so rather than rejecting it, just like we're talking about how we don't want to do that with relationships and with people in the world, we do that with ourselves. We reject parts of ourselves. And so as opposed to like, I got to get this thing, got to do it different, got to get over it, got to let this thing go. It's like, what if we just like call it to the dinner table
Right. And
and
pull
make
up a
nice
chair and
dinner?
have some
It's like,
dessert with me.
yeah.
Right, but you've also just hit it on something that, excuse me, which I think is important also is the control aspect that Scorpio loves to make sure that it's covered all ends so that we don't get caught out. And as a very strong Scorpio, I know this is like, I've completely let go, but I've made sure that the result still goes the way that I want it, which is not really letting go. That's just a very subversive way of manipulation with yourself. And I think that we have to be careful of this. And perhaps that's also one of the great teachings of Scorpio is how much are we lying to ourselves about how much have we really let go, how much are we really unattached, or how much am I still playing the control game in the background? I think maybe if we look at the financial system again, the Taurus Scorpio axis would include this, is how much control is still being attempted to be wielded over the collective by the misuse of other people's money. Again, very Scorpio, right?
100%. I mean, yeah, and really all we can control is ourselves. So, if we want to see a different hologram, it's like, where are we manipulating ourselves or still holding on? And, it's all very existential. I mean, the Scorpio and then the Taurus, I mean, the, Pisces North Node, we're all at the edge here of the cliff.
Right, yeah.
Um, and so there's not necessarily a clear map, right? It's the terrain is all inside and where we can be self-honest with ourselves and also where's our root, And I always just like to double down that we're eternal and that we signed up for all of this. But I think rigorous self-honesty, and I think that exact square with Pluto Mercury is really calling us to the carpet. Um, During this full moon about where are we hiding parts of ourselves even from ourselves and where we think that we're yeah think that we're in full alignment but maybe have another layer to shed.
Right, and maybe as we round out today's talk, that's just an internal, ongoing reflection and meditation for all of us. I'm just going to take this down, Shannon, as we're going to wrap up. Just about managed to keep my eyes and nose under control. If anyone was watching the amount of times I was having to use a tissue, apologies. I'm still struggling a bit with the sinuses. But thank you so much, Shannon, for that overview. I think that you've really nicely given us a sort of the perspective of what we're heading into with this full moon, with the Scorpio energies, and also how that links to the Uranus Cazimi. So perhaps as a roundout, do you have a sort of a wraparound conclusion? And also please share where people can find out more about the work you do online.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think just this trusting the process, and creating space for whatever it is, the surrender, we evolve through the emotional body. So I don't know. I don't have any water in my chart, but I do know that tears and things like that, let the waters flow, make some space around this lunation. And I think that our greatest responsibility right now is to keep our eyes on the horizon line. I feel like we've just been having Braxton Hicks through the birth canal here, and we've arrived. And we know that birth is bloody and it's nonlinear and it's absolutely wondrous and organic. And so it feels like each of us have that responsibility with our thoughts, not to get caught up into the fear porn and the division and all of the things. And to do again, with the nodes, that's always where we really want to focus and look like what is our karmic edge of our evolution. And Virgo is the temple, it's the body. How can we work to continue to purify, like Davyd and Bella working with the plants and all the ways that we do that, and then just surrender, just continue. It's that balancing of being in motion in our rhythms and trying to find our best to be in alignment, and then stay in that ever present now and surrender that we're going to make it to the other side of this. And not only are we going to make it to the other side of this, but we are creating it to be a beautiful new world that's going to be harmonious, and there's going to be quality for everyone. So.
Wow, bless you. And if people want to book an appointment with you or look more into your work, do you have a website we can share, Shannon?
Yeah, thanks. It's my name, Shannon Lee Gill, Leigill, is my website. And then if you're like in the Austin area, we do a lot of the astrological events. You can find us at theshiftfoundation.net.
Beautiful. Well, I'll put those in the show notes for people to check into. But thank you so much for doing this,
Yeah, thank
sister.
you.
It's short notice. I know that you also have to shoot off, but thank you for giving us these coordinates. I think they're important, and also giving us more of the Western overview of how we can feel into the energy patterns before they get to us. A lot of this looking down the timeline, I think, is useful so that we can be prepared. But as a final thought, I welcome radical authenticity. I think that this full moon offers us the chance for us to really find out who we truly are and to live from that place. It's one of the reasons I love the Mayan glyph essences. To live from the truth of who we are is really about as much as we can do. And I'd like to think that New Earth is based on that. So thank you again, sister. Thank you, everybody, for watching. In Lakesh, I am another you. We'll see you all again very soon. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.